Started. If you are looking right now at us, if you're in the StreamYard, please put your name in the chat so I can say hi. Well, if you aren't able to put your name in the chat, just wave your hand so we can see you. All right. Hi, Japlin Jazz and Beulah. Good to see you, and thanks for joining us this evening. We'll be starting momentarily. Got some really great information for you. Harley, welcome. Tiffany, hi. Diana, thanks for joining. We're going to have a good time this evening. All right, well, let's get started. Thank you again so much for joining the Reform Illinois Virtual Town Hall. Emmanuel, hello. So let's get started here. You know, Reform is a national organization working hard to transform probation and parole in America. You know, there are nearly 4 million people on probation or parole, which is almost twice the number of people incarcerated. Instead of keeping people trapped in a revolving door from supervision of prison, we're working to move people from the justice system into stability. Our goal is for people on parole and probation to re enter society with dignity, create meaningful pathways to work, and equip them with the tools to succeed, translating into families and communities that are safer and stronger. Here's a little bit more about reform by the numbers. We've had 16 bills to pass in 10 states, creating new pathways for over 650,000 people to exit the system. Now that's fantastic. Well, how do we do that? What's our approach? Our approach is that the work isn't limited to just legislation. We work at reform to replace America's justice system with a restorative system that is fair, accountable, and invested in rehabilitation, support, and well being. We want to get as many people out of the system as possible. So, not just stop there. We can't just stop there. We want to make sure that they have jobs and that they have stability in their lives and they have wellness. In addition to reform's legislative work, the organization is focused on creating job opportunities through our job fair programs, offering mental health resources to system impacted individuals, partnering with community organizations, reentry groups, and local businesses. And guess what? We just started the Illinois Secure Communities Coalition, which is led by Reform, but powered by a broad bipartisan group of organizations and businesses. Listen, we've got a lot to do. And we're just so excited that you're here with us this evening to help us in this movement. So we're going to get started and we're going to kick this over to Darrell. But before we do that, let me tell you about me. I'm Roxanne, and I'm the Midwest Regional Director. I joined Reform in October of 2022, so I'm still a newbie. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a law degree from Illinois School. I've worked in numerous corporations in Illinois as a senior staff member in human resources and governmental relations. Now, you know I'm from Illinois because number one, I'm a Bulls fan. whether they're winning or losing. I'm also a Chicago Bears fan. Whether they're winning or losing, I'm a White Sox fan. So you know what that means. Soft side, I keep 4 seasons of clothes in my closet at once. You know why? And I have a four-wheel drive for the snow. So listen, in the chat, tell me what part of Illinois, what part of Chicago you're from. Are you a fellow Southsider? Let me know. All right, so now we're going to kick it to the wonderful Darrell. Darrell is fantastic. He's going to give us some great information. He's our manager of membership. Darrell, kick it off.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. I'm really excited to speak with the Prairie State, Illinois tonight. There is so much amazing work that's happening in Illinois, and we are excited about engaging and inform you all about what's to come. Our department, memberships and community engagement, we work to mobilize our members to become advocates for criminal justice reform at every single level. Whether it's through state campaigns or national campaigns, we're dedicated to helping our community of reformers make meaningful impact in their local system and in their communities. Through grassroots engagement, our mission is to foster a vibrant, connected community of reformers who are passionate about system change. Our areas of focus, in addition to reformer engagement, is to also believe that community engagement is a critical component of the fight for criminal justice reform. We're committed to creating opportunities for our members to engage with one another and with their local communities so that we can build a strong, connected movement that is capable of achieving real change. The first step to getting involved in our mission is to become a reformer. When you become a reformer, you aren't simply signing up to support a cause. You are joining a larger community of individuals who are passionate about criminal justice reform. In addition to the sense of camaraderie and connection that comes with being part of a larger community, becoming a reformer can also be incredibly empowering. By working together with others, you can create real and lasting change and make a positive impact on the lives of others. Ultimately, being a reformer is about more than just advocating for a cause. It's about being a part of a community that is dedicated to creating a better world for all. Why become a reformer, you ask? One, you believe in second chances. Two, you have a desire for justice and fairness. And three, you have been personally impacted or know people who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. There are benefits of being a part of our membership as well. You have access to BetterHelp, which is a mental health platform that provides online mental health services directly to consumers. And you are able to take advantage of our Applied Digital Skills Training, which is a free online platform that offers a variety of interactive courses to help the individuals develop their digital skills. I'll kick you back over to you, Roxanne.
All right. Thanks so much, Darrell. So listen, you've heard what it means to be a reformer. We've got some fantastic benefits and we've got more to come. So listen, now I'm going to introduce you to our superstar Aaron. Aaron is our senior director of policy and law. All right, Aaron, fill him in.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Roxanne, and thank you, Darrell. Thanks for having me here this evening. I'm so excited to talk to everybody about the work that Reform is doing in Illinois. And I'm going to warn you guys, this is where we get into some of the nerdy stuff. So I hope y'all will stay with me and have some fun with it. We're going to talk not only about what Reform does generally, but really specifically about what Reform is planning to do with the help from all of you and with the incredible community that exists in Illinois and that's been supporting the effort so far. So really, really excited to share what's been happening so far. As Roxanne said, I'm the director of our policy and law department here at Reform. That means that I run all of our initiatives and priorities that deal with policy or law, whether that's county work, state work, or federal work. And our department focuses on Reform's core policy objectives for all levels of government. One of reform's core beliefs is championing the stories of those directly impacted. To do this, we leverage our organizing and storytelling capacity through working closely with the other departments and organizations, some of the ones that Darrell described just a second ago. We work with our members, with our reformers, to really advance and highlight those powerful stories to show why reform is necessary. Our key goals here at Reform are supporting the reimagining of community supervision, grounding the policies we advocate for in evidence-based practices, and improving the lives of thousands through our legislation. Roxanne started out by saying that we have passed 16 bills in 10 different states, which has opened up a pathway for 650,000 people to get off of supervision and into wellness over the next 5 years. So really our goal here at Reform is, of course, not just to pass bills, but to actually pass meaningful reforms that will truly impact people and make lives better. So in that vein, at Reform, we have a policy framework that guides our work. I think a lot of folks who have joined us, I imagine, are interested in a number of different issues that relate to criminal justice, as are the people that work at Reform. But as our professional sort of job here at Reform, right, we focus on probation and parole. And so we have a framework that guides our core mission. And really that involves sort of a pipeline from prison to freedom, right? So when we think about the work that Reform does in Illinois and does all over the nation, what we're looking at are 3 buckets of work that really help move people from out of a cage all the way to full freedom. And so the first part of this is, of course, making sure that people are freed from incarceration. And able to actually be in the community. And to do this, we identify opportunities to safely release people from incarceration in a manner that doesn't present any risk to public safety. And there are lots of different ways to do this, right? So you can look at certain groups that pose low risk, people who were young, who were sentenced when they were young, right? People who are older, so who have been incarcerated and are in their elder years. And studies show that people over the age of 55 are far less likely to recidivate. Medical parole opportunities, right? Or medical reprieve, it's sometimes called. So people who are ill and behind bars, who are desperately trying to get back to their families for whatever time they have left, right? Ensuring that we're able to get them home to their families. Making sure that there are experts on the parole board or on the decision-making board that can help ensure that people really are getting second chances. Making sure that there are people who are directly involved in those decision-making boards. And I know in Illinois, it gets especially important when we start talking about the limited pathways to release that are currently available in Illinois, right? So the ways that we can start thinking through how to open up some of those pathways and ensure that people can get out of those cages, out from incarceration and into the community. And once folks are in the community, this is when we look at this second area of work that Reform does, right? So from ineffective punishment to smart support. Right? So how do we change the system that we have now, the system of supervision, which was intended really to be an alternative to incarceration, but of course has ended up being one of the primary drivers of incarceration? How do we change that system to ensure that it is instead supportive for reentry, that instead of it being an obstacle or a stumbling block to success, that it is a springboard to success, or at the very least a safety net? One of the examples that we hear the American Probation and Parole Association talk about is the difference between a referee and a coach. So ideally, right, supervision officers would be coaches. They would be folks who are standing by, really seeking to help somebody, rooting them on, providing whatever resources are necessary to succeed, as opposed to the system that we see all too often today, which is one of a referee, where it's just somebody sort of standing by, waiting for someone to step outside of the line and then assessing a consequence, right? So the second area that we deal with really applies to sort of what is life like on supervision. How can we apply evidence-based policies? So this has everything to do with things like supervision lengths and terms, using evidence-based terms. We know that with supervision, less is in fact more. Once you have longer supervision terms, you actually get a reduced return on it, and you can actually get a decrease in public safety and an increase in recidivism, right? So making sure that supervision terms aren't too long, that they're evidence-based, making sure that the conditions that somebody faces while they're under supervision are individualized, that they make sense for that person in that case, that they aren't overly cumbersome or onerous or impossible to abide by. And as to that, ensuring that we also have graduated sanctions for technical violations. Even though I worked as a defense attorney for about a decade before coming to reform, I was shocked to know how many people are in prison, not for committing a crime, but for breaking a rule on supervision. That's still something, after doing this work for a while, that boggles the mind. And so ensuring that people cannot be incarcerated for technical violations, right? That there are graduated sanctions, that there are other ways to approach rules violations rather than incarceration is a big part of the work that reform does, along with protecting due process during supervision violation hearings. And I think it goes sort of with conditions, but ensuring that things like remote reporting are available so that people aren't having to choose between going to their job and reporting, and really making sure that we have incentives systems in place for folks on supervision. So rather than only look at whether somebody has done something wrong or broken a rule or gotten in trouble and assess a consequence, in every other area of our life, we use not just those consequences, but we also use incentives, right? The criminal justice system is one of the only places that is all stick, no carrot. And so one of the things that reform is seeking to do is ensure that we have incentive systems that encourage people to get education, to work, to take care of their family, to do community service, and that they get credit for doing all of those things, right? So that they aren't just getting, sort of called out when something goes wrong, but really appreciated and credited with time when something goes right. And then this very last area is from supervision to wellness. So as both Roxanne and Darrell have mentioned, it's not just enough to make sure that somebody gets off of supervision with as few collateral consequences as possible and as quickly and safely as possible, right? We also need to support the community and support our folks in the community. So this involves things like job training and job placement. Reform does a lot of job fairs where we connect businesses to people who are formerly incarcerated or on supervision or recently on supervision who are looking for work and have incredible talent. So we connect them with employers who really could utilize and benefit from that talent. Mental health support, housing support, really a more holistic way of looking at how do we support folks in the community. So that's sort of the last piece of our policy framework. And I do want to note that while this is our framework, we have in the past scrapped the entire policy framework when we've come to a jurisdiction or a state and we've heard from folks, look, there's actually something really different that's happening on the ground that we want you to know about. The data only tells part of the picture, but there's something that really relates to the mission regarding parole and probation or supervised release, but isn't really captured so far in these options. So what we really do, I think what's most important at reform is that we want to hear from folks on the ground. We want to make sure that we are framing the problem correctly and that we are solving a problem that will make a difference. We want to make sure that folks who are directly impacted are leading, that there's not just a seat at the table for them, but that they can actually hear their voices echoed in the text of these laws and these new essential reforms. We always want to work with our community partners to craft public safety solutions and transform supervision culture in the community and provide those avenues to wellness and well-being. So connecting with community groups on the ground is a huge part of what we do. And so I want to talk a little bit in Illinois, what we've learned from talking to folks on the ground, from talking to our community groups on the ground and our folks who are directly impacted. And we want to talk about exactly what the problem is that the legislation the coalition is bringing seeks to address. So at the end of 2020, 1 in 86 Illinois adults were under some form of supervision. More than 22,000 people are serving a term of mandatory supervised release or MSR. 97,000 more people are serving a term of probation. And many of these folks, as we just sort of were talking through the policy framework, many of these folks are set up to fail, right? A recent report revealed that a staggering 1 in 4 people released from prison in Illinois returned for a technical violation of supervision within just 3 years of release. This is baffling. Technical violations are most often non-criminal behavior. Sometimes they can be really, really minor criminal behavior, but almost always non-criminal rules violations, like being late to a meeting with a supervision officer or driving across country lines to pick up your child from school, county lines. It can be having dinner with a loved one who's also on supervision or has a record, right? All of these things can constitute violations, which can land people right back in a cell. And when we think about the tremendous work that people go through in the community to really stabilize their lives, to overcome stigma and barriers, to hold down a job, to help their family, to contribute with all of their talents and skills to make their communities better, the idea that we would be ripping them out of those communities, taking them away from their families and putting them in a cell because of a rules violation is just heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking, really, not just for the individual, right? That incarceration doesn't just place a burden on that individual, but also on the taxpayers, right? On crime survivors, and on communities at large. Every time we take somebody out of the community, put them in a cell, that the community is destabilized, right? That family is left without a critical family member. There's an employer who's left without an employee. And so, there are also, of course, children left without a parent, right? So we are fundamentally changing the structure of the community when we lock somebody up, and to do it for mere rules violations that don't implicate public safety, again, is something that reform is committed to stopping. And so in order for supervision to be successful anywhere, but especially in Illinois, right, the goals would be to remove counterproductive conditions, increase the use of meaningful incentives, and embrace common sense policies like remote reporting that remove barriers to success. So again, when we think about a state like Illinois that has such a high number of people going back for technical violations, right? What we really wanted to focus on, based on what folks who were impacted told us, is how do we incentivize sort of good activities and make sure that people get credit for those? And how do we reduce these technical violations from creeping up and reduce the consequences of those? Great. And so that's really how the Illinois Secure Communities Coalition was founded, right? So when we go into a state, we make it a priority to meet with stakeholders and identify problems that currently exist in the supervision system. That's how we got all that information that we just went over. And we do it with a big tent. We talk to people on supervision. We talk to employers, prosecutors, supervision officers, Department of Correction. And we know that this problem impacts everyone, right? We talk a lot about people who are directly impacted leading, because it is so important. But as a colleague of ours, a friend of ours, Dr. Topeka Sam, reminds us, we also want to make sure that everybody recognizes that we are all impacted in some way by this system, right? And so we want to make sure that that's evident and that we are all included in the solution. And so in 2023, we formed a coalition of all of these various stakeholders. And it's the Illinois Secure Communities Coalition, which is a bipartisan group working to improve Illinois' supervision system and build safer, stronger, and more prosperous communities. Coalition members include systems actors, advocacy organizations, representatives from the private sector, concerned citizens, and more. And it's truly a diverse coalition of people, but all with the same goal: reforming the system for the better. Each legislative cycle presents a different opportunity to make progress and different challenges. And so we're very, very excited about where we are this session, where we've been focused on promoting transparency, creating smart incentives, and really uplifting remote reporting to get rid of some of these onerous conditions. So our legislative solutions this cycle which fall into those categories. We have first, bolstering transparency and creating positive feedback mechanisms between supervision officers, the people they supervise, and the prisoner review board. We can do this by having supervision officers draft regular progress reports and make a recommendation on early termination for folks on parole or MSR. So we want to make sure that folks know how they're doing based on the progress reports. We want to make sure that there's communication, and we want to make sure that we are setting people up to be discharged early when they're doing everything that they should, right? So really making that a part of the standardized process is important. And hand in hand with that, we want to incentivize people on parole and MSR to pursue an education or vocational training and comply with their supervision conditions. These are all proven to reduce recidivism and facilitate successful reentry. These are all things that can shorten safely the supervision time period and increase success in the community. These incentives also help people provide for families and strengthen the workforce, right? So they have tremendous benefits to the community as well. And in exchange, people would earn time off of their supervision term for completing educational activities. So people on MSR parole could earn 90 days off their supervision term for getting an associate's or bachelor's degree, a career certificate, or a vocational certificate. And this would put Illinois in the company of over 20 other states who have done this with really impressive success, right? So while we think that this is a common sense reform, it's also a tried and true reform. It happens in blue states, red states, purple states, and what they've seen is not only a benefit to the folks who are on supervision, but also to communities at large. There's a huge cost avoidance that comes with it, which can be put into other, those scarce resources then can be put into other things, which is incredibly important. And then finally, we want to examine the conditions, right? So we want to make sure that conditions are individualized, that rather than just having a long list of conditions that apply to everybody, while some of those conditions may in fact, be applicable to a large swath of folks, we do want to make sure that each condition makes sense for the person who it's being ordered to apply to. This will cut down on technical violations. And in addition to that, we want to make sure that regardless of what conditions you have, that remote reporting is something that both officers and people on supervision can utilize regularly and effectively. And for this, although we've talked mostly about folks on parole and really mandatory supervised release, this also applies to people on probation, right? We want to make sure that remote reporting, which is something that was used during the pandemic with great success, is actually used by everyone and on a regular basis, so that you aren't having to choose between staying at your job, right, which is something that you have to do to be successful while on supervision, and meeting the requirement that you meet with your supervision officer in the middle of the day. Most people can't just leave their job to travel to meet with the supervision officer, so being able to do it remotely is extremely important and cuts down on technical violations while safely increasing community success. And so I think the idea here again is really to look at what these issues are that you all have brought us. So many people who are with us today are folks who have participated in our conversations and discussions about what really the goals need to be and what the actual real life problems are. And so these are the solutions that we're advancing now, and we're incredibly hopeful that not just with the support, but with the stories and with the leadership of you all who are joining us tonight, that we can actually make this happen. And I'll pass it back to you, Roxanne.
Really educated us this evening, and we're very, very grateful. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Darrell. So now this is your opportunity to ask questions and get real answers. We've got the pro with us, Aaron, and we've got Darrell. So please ask some questions. Come on, don't be scared. I know with all the great information that you've been given this evening, you got some questions. So come on. All right. So listen, this is what we can do. because in order for us to succeed, we've all got to be involved, right? We've got to be involved. Evelyn, I see that you say you have many questions. Listen, we're willing to answer some of those questions. Let me tell you how you can become a reformer. This is what you can do. You can join our membership by visiting www.reformalliance.com. That's reformalliance.com. Or you can text reform, REFORM, to 81411. Again, text reform to 81411. Secondly, we are full of social media. So you can join our social media by following us at Reform on our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We're real cool. And finally, the best way to grow our movement and work together is to share your knowledge of reform and the wonderful work that you've heard from Aaron and from Darrell with your family and friends. And listen, I want to invite you to something. Next Friday, March 17th, we are having a in-person luncheon in Townhall. Love to have you with us. It's from 11 to 1, Chicago State. You've got register. So you can email me at Roxanne, ROXNNE, at Reform, REFORM, Alliance, ALLIANCE.com, and tell me that I want to come, and I'll send you a personal invite, okay? We'd love to see you. Together we win. Aaron, thank you. Darrell, thank you. Reform team, thank you. And the biggest thank you of all to our reformers who came out this evening. We know there were many programs you could have been watching on TV, but instead you came to be with us. And for that, we are grateful. Have a wonderful night, and we look forward to seeing you become a reformer. Thank you. Good night.